Does the image from the C70 with its 4K all-eye 10-bit outperform my C100 Mark II to the point where it's worth this upgrade? And the second thing I really want to find out is, can these cut together? Because the specs on this thing are out of control. This is a 6-year-old 1080 8-bit camera that shoots at 24 megabits a second. When you offload cards from this, it's like you're offloading audio only. It's like the file sizes are so small. But it looks great. The C100 Mark II came out in 2016. I bought it in late 2017, and its price currently stands at $2,700. The sensor in the C70 comes from the C300 Mark III, and that camera costs $11,000. I shot all of the tests on the C70 at 4K, all-eye, 10-bit, the max settings I can have. And on the C100, I shot not in C-Log, but in YDR, because C-Log on this codec is tough to work with, to say the least. I never get an image that I'm happier with out of this camera in C-Log than I do in YDR. If you put the work into it, it can get as good as the YDR image looks right out of camera. The only time I ever use C-Log on this camera is if I'm second shooting for someone with a more expensive camera and they want to match C-Log to C-Log. So this apartment test was lit with a 120D light dome, a little hair light, and a tiny Aputure LED, giving a little kick to the Christmas tree. Here we are in Premiere. C70 is in S-Log2 and C100 Mark II is in YDR. So what I'm gonna do is convert C-Log2 to YDR with the Canon supplied LUT, Canon Log2 to BT709 YDR. Bam, YDR versus YDR. Now the C70 looks a little bit richer. They both look pretty similar though, but whenever I shoot YDR, of course I don't leave it that way. With the C100, I'm gonna tweak it. I'm gonna add some contrast, some saturation, whatnot. I also wouldn't just dump a LUT on C-Log2, I would also tweak it. Those tweaks look like this. C-Log2 converted to YDR, then tweaked. C100 shot in YDR and then tweaked. Let's go to a close-up. Both have a lot of detail. I mean, I could be prettier, but honestly, I think the one of these that's gonna look the best is just the one that you spend more time coloring. Let's move on to my party shirt. This is me shooting YDR versus YDR. If I had a quick turnaround project and I didn't want to shoot in log, I just colored to taste with a few minutes on each, and these can easily cut together. So the answer to my question of can these cut together, yes. Now this second test has no lighting, just backlit with a window at a bunch of different exposures and seeing where we can pull detail from the shadows and where highlights start to get lost. So I will apply the LUT, converting C-Log2 to YDR. This is with 4 stops of ND on both cameras. If I was shooting to preserve the highlights and get like a silhouette-y look. Let's say we want a little bit of detail in me. So I took 2 stops of ND off both cameras. And with the LUT applied, the C100, you have a lot more detail. I'm sure that detail is in there, and we'll get to that in a second in the C70. So now let's take off all the ND. There's definitely some clipping in both images. In the C70, it's just the very top of the sky, it looks like. And so far, with no NDs, I think the C100 looks better. So I think this is gonna be a matter of exposing higher on the C70. This is with no NDs, ISO that was upped to 1600 on both cameras. And you can see there's detail in my face in both, a little bit more in the C100, but we're losing all of this counter and this looks terrible. This setting, 1600 with no ND at 1.8 is probably where I would expose the C70 if I was just monitoring with false color, because I could see that the only blown out items were not the table and not even the trees outside, but just the sky. Now I expose a little higher on both cameras, really exposing for the face and not giving a about the outside. It's blowing out on the table and it's blowing out right there with my hand and above that in both cameras. Well, a lot more in the C100. Now, finally, does my skin look less noisy? Not really in the C70. The table's blown out on both. I mean, it's blown out worse on the C100, but it's blown out on both. But my face is noisier on the C70. The highlights are blown out. If I take the LUT off, you can see they're clipped. We add the LUT. I know this is like the worst possible scenario, but I was hoping it would do something like better. I can't just give it a quick little lumetri tweak. I need to really put it in DaVinci, see what I can do if I really want to color it. Let's see if we can bring that face up. Doing the old lift gamma gain dance. Little of this, little of that, before, after, and my face is filled with noise. At least I can see my face. I would use a power window or one of these gradients to keep all the highlight detail. Now if I create another node, steal the alpha channel and invert it, I can drop the highlights on the right side of the screen. And I mean, I don't love this because there's so much noise in shadows and on my face, but I did leave a blank node at the beginning of my tree for a reason. Denoising. Not a big fan of denoising because it takes forever, but I can tell that this clip really needs it. Let's do spatial and temporal, around 10 for each. This is the reason why I hate noise reduction. My mouse is like lagging as I'm trying to work. Okay, back in Premiere after kicking those 2 shots out from DaVinci, which took like 10 minutes because of the noise reduction. This is what it looks like with the dual exposure kind of grade where I kept all of this detail in the reflection on the table and brought up my face a bit. I think it looks pretty good compared to the C100. Not a huge difference. In the C100, I definitely lose more on the table. You can see this table, you see all the scratches, you can see that there's detail there, whereas this is kind of just a sheet of white. So far, dynamic range, better on C70. Is it miles better? No, just a tad, just a smidge, maybe 2 smidges. The only time when I think the C70 has actually a big advantage is in something like this, where I punch in to the 4K to 100%, and in order to get an equivalent shot, I would have to punch in on the C100 to 200%. When you do that, yeah, it looks better. The 4K looks better, especially in the shirt. You can see the detail in my grapefruits. My grapefruits over here look very mushy. If you're gonna be cropping in 200% on your 1080 timeline, or for some reason like rendering in 4K, then yeah, the C70 has an upper hand. One other thing that comes to mind is that if I was shooting VFX, if I was doing something like green screen especially, all that extra color information would really help me out. And it would be a no comparison, C70 wins there. So now that I've reviewed all this footage and I see the noise reduced, power windowed C70 4K footage, it's kind of amazing when you before after the LUT versus what happened in Resolve. Like there's a lot there. The thing that really kind of irks me almost is that it really looks very similar to the C100. It's really not that the C70 is a disappointment. It's that the C100 Mark II is just such a great buy, even still in 2021. I love it. I love it. So now I have a B camera and an A camera that I love. To answer my 2 questions from the start, number 1, does the sensor give me like a lot more opportunity with the dynamic range and the detail that I didn't have with my C100? The answer is kind of no, at least so far with these tests. When the sun does come out, I'm gonna do some tests outdoors. Second question, can they cut together? Yeah, absolutely. If I like mixed them up for myself without labels, I wouldn't be able to tell which is which once I have the LUT on the C-Log. Subscribe if you want to see more tests. I'm definitely going to be testing these guys together in a lot of other situations, not inside my apartment in my tiny kitchen. If I did anything wrong on the C70 to limit its potential detail and dynamic range, let me know. If anyone knows any good third-party LUTs converting C-Log to something usable, please send them my way. I definitely want to learn how to best use this camera. So if I missed anything, leave it below. Thanks for watching. I'm going to go pet my Christmas tree.